Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be re-lent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a micro-lender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
Well, today I have the pleasure of speaking to Robert Lufkin. I hope I said that right.
Yep, perfect.
Excellent. Dr. Robert Lufkin is a metabolic health and longevity expert. He helps people to live longer and enjoy themselves the whole time. He also is the host of Health Longevity Secrets podcast with hundreds of thousands of listeners. In addition to being a practicing physician, Dr. Lufkin has served as a professor at UCLA and USC Medical School and is the author of more than 200 peer-reviewed scientific papers and 13 books. I think I need to take a nap right after that.
You will if you try and read them.
Dr. Rob, how are you?
Great, Gerald. It's so nice to be with you today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I always ask my authors and experts two questions as a musician. One, what is your favorite style of music?
Wow. I've liked different music, different styles over my lifetime. And my daughter's extremely into hip hop right now. But I must say that I still like trance, EDM, techno, that kind of music.
Okay. Excellent. It'd be kind of fun to come to one of your classes. Have that music as you're walking in. That's pretty cool. So do you have a favorite piece of music? Do you have a favorite song or?
Wow, yeah, and it's actually not of that genre. I would say it's an old song called "Sounds of Silence" by Simon and Garfunkel wrote that. I love the words. I love the melody. I love the poetic lyrics that Paul Simon did with that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because with that song, he's actually telling a story, right? And he's like taking you on the journey of the sounds of silence. And as you start talking about it, like the song starts playing in my head. I'm like, I love that one. So listen, we're going to have a conversation today about a book you wrote, which I think has a really interesting and intriguing title called The Lies I Taught in Medical School. Like, I looked at the cover and I was like, what? Who would confess that? But here you are, you did, and practicing, and they still hired you to be a professor, and you're still practicing as a physician. And so I'd like to start off with asking the question, what has helped you to become so successful throughout your career?
Wow, that's a great question. I think goes down to something very basic. It's being curious and not afraid to ask questions, and realizing, as the title of the book implies, science is constantly changing. And what I thought was true 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago may not be true today. And in my case, looking at science, but whatever we look at it in life, look at it with an open mind. Yep. And hearing other possibilities, and be open to other ways of seeing things and interpreting things. I think that's what served me well, particularly in this.
That's awesome, because I was thinking about this as you were talking, and I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at the cover of the book in the background, and I was just thinking, man, what a humble stance to take, where you have written 200 plus peer-reviewed papers on medicine, where other doctors had to weigh in on whether your research was valid or not, right? And then you've written 13 books, but then to write a book about, hey, you know what? I don't think I always got it right in school as I was teaching, right? As an expert. And that's a humble stance to take, which puts you on a path of being a learner, right? And that's really what life's all about. It's that, because for myself, as many authors that I've interviewed and books I've read, the more I read and the more I dig is the more I realize I don't know. And the more I realize that there's so much more out there to learn, and that even if you could read all of the books in a particular genre of medicine or art or whatever, that there's still more to learn, because if you're open to it, you're still going to discover new concepts or new ideas. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's great. The idea that science is changing, in particular for the book title, it was not my idea. In fact, one of the greatest physicians of all time, Sir William Osler, wrote one of the greatest quotes about education of all time when he was addressing a class of graduating medical students over 100 years ago. Okay. And he famously said, on the last day of medical school, the day they became physicians, he said, gentlemen, and at the time most of them were male, but he said, gentlemen, we have a confession to make. 50% of what we've just taught you is incorrect or flat out wrong. The problem is we don't know which half it is. But to your point, that's what, that things are always changing, and our views of reality are changing too. The world as we see it is constantly changing, at least our perspective of it. And having that open mind, that learner's mind, that beginner's mind, as the Zen people say, is really a powerful tool, I think.
Yes. Now, in the book, Lies I Taught in Medical School, you challenge the conventional medical wisdom. And how do we deal with the idea that sometimes information gets outdated or is misleading, that can negatively impact, right, individuals? And you also wrote at the end of the book, you also talked about the plan, right? And I kind of tie these two together, where you have outdated information that you don't know which part of it is outdated until you do more research. But then at the end of the book, you write this thing called the plan, simple lifestyle changes that can prevent or reverse disease. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. It all goes back to, I'll set the stage here. The book is critical of Western medicine, sort of allopathic medicine. And I'm a product of that system. As a professor at medical schools, I'm part of the Western medicine system. Even though it's critical of Western medicine, I say today, if I still believe in it, if I get hit by a car, I want Western medicine. I want that blood transfusion. I want my spleen removed. I want my bones set. But the problem is, in the 20th century, for those of us who are alive back then, Western medicine was revolutionary. It transformed the lives of everyone pretty much all over the world for the better, largely
Right.
through infectious disease and public health measures. Pills and surgery that Western medicine that developed were nothing short of magical, and the effect on our health was, unprecedented. The problem is, in the 21st century, today, we're now facing literally a tsunami of so-called chronic diseases. These diseases were present in the 20th century, but nowhere near the biblical numbers that we're seeing now. And these diseases are things like obesity. Today, most people are overweight or obese. Diabetes, we're on the way to half of people getting these, on then to cancer, heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, even mental illness.
Yeah.
And the problem is, when Western medicine takes the same pills and surgeries that were so effective in the last century and applies to these chronic diseases, while they may be life-saving in the short term, in other words, they may make the symptoms go away,
Right.
in most cases, they don't address the underlying root cause, and these diseases actually continue to progress.
Right.
And that's the problem now. And there is a solution for addressing these root causes, and that's what the book's about. It's about these diseases, these chronic diseases, although they seem very different,
Right.
they're actually driven by the same root causes based on metabolic health, things like insulin resistance, inflammation, oxidation. And there are things that will improve these. Unfortunately, pills and surgery don't do it, but something even more powerful called lifestyle will. And lifestyle makes it possible to, in many cases, reverse these chronic diseases or decrease our risk of them in the ways that pills and surgery can't. And I learned this sort of the hard way. I came down with 4 of these chronic diseases myself. Not long ago, I went to my doctors, and they prescribed prescription medicines for each one of them. And I said, hey, is there anything else I could do? What about lifestyle? Does that work? And they go, nah, that really doesn't work. You're going to be on these pills for the rest of your life. So get used to it. And at that point, it sort of forced me out of self-interest to look closely at research that had been done. And I realized there was a whole body of research, peer-reviewed studies that had been done that I wasn't aware of, that many of my colleagues are still not aware of, showing that lifestyle indeed will reverse these chronic diseases and make the need for prescription drugs, in many cases, even unnecessary. In my case, I was able to reverse the diseases and get off those prescription drugs. So now I've made it my mission to help other people take back their health and hopefully not make the same mistakes that I did.
Exactly. So what are those simple lifestyle changes? Because you literally say simple lifestyle changes. So what are they?
First of all, nobody disagrees that a healthy lifestyle isn't a good idea.
Right.
Even your doctors will say that. The problem is, what constitutes a healthy lifestyle? There's so much disagreement about diets. Diets are almost like politics. You have a right-wing diet, a left-wing diet, and and everything's become so politicized. And so it's obviously the key is doing the right lifestyle changes, and that's what I talk about. What worked for me, and what I believe the evidence is that will work for everyone else. And it boils down to four basic things. We go into a detail in the book, but first of all, is nutrition, which is foundational. Sleep, quality and quantity, exercise, both physical and mental exercise, including strength training, lifting weights. No matter how old you are, you should be lifting weights.
Right.
And then finally, stress, mindset, how we view the world we live in. In other words, when I look at the world, do I see a dangerous, scary place full of bad things that can happen to me and threats? Or do I see a world of possibility and growth and love and purpose that fills me with happiness every day when I wake up? And mindset will greatly affect our stress. So those 4 basic things is something we can do every day, because even though I'm a doctor, I realize doctors don't make me healthy. I go to a doctor to become less sick. if I want to become healthy, that's on me, and that's with lifestyle. And lifestyle is something no doctor can do for me. I, as a patient, choose that myself every morning when I get up, when I exercise, when I sleep, what I put in my mouth to eat, the way I view the world. All those are lifestyle things, but they're completely under my control as a patient. So it's very empowering, I think, to think of these are things we can all do,
right,
to be healthier.
I wanted to start off our conversation with, at the end of your book, the plan, to say there are answers, and you really do give some really interesting ways to look at things. And I thought one of the areas around food and nutrition, you talked a lot about the timing of when you eat, not so much, it's what you eat, obviously, but it's also how you eat and when you eat. And if you're giving your body that break that it needs, or, kind of allowing the body to process the food at the right times when it's most optimal for the body to process food. Obviously, 9:00 at night is not the right time to have pizza, right? Or cake and ice cream, or whatever that dessert is that we all love. But there's times, and I know you talk about it, I don't want to have you go through in detail all of that, but I just thought that was really intriguing and interesting that you have in the book. But I want to jump on to another area, and that is around the idea of struggle and burnout that professionals deal with, or really a lot of people are dealing with, not just professionals. And I think a big part of it also ties into obesity, right? Because when we're obese, we're carrying around more weight. We are not addressing our own stress levels. We tend to not sleep well, so we start having sleep disorders. We may have sleep apnea. Then we go to the grocery store and we look for the low carb or the low calorie substitutes. And all of those things are somewhat kind of medical myths or food myths that really don't help us when it comes to the idea of obesity, burnout, and struggles. So can you talk a little bit about that? I know you have a chapter about the obesity lie. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, all these things are related, and it's such a good question with obesity. Obesity in itself, the extra fat is pro-inflammatory. In other words, it drives chronic inflammation, which is the kind of inflammation which makes us age. Similarly, food contributes to obesity, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but other things like stress can make us gain weight. Stress could drive insulin. Insulin's the hormone that makes us store fat. Similarly, if our sleep is disordered, there's a famous experiment where healthy college students were deprived of sleep, and within a matter of 48 hours or so, they all started to have insulin resistance, inflammation, and prediabetes, which can lead to weight gain as well. So all these factors play a role. But the big lie with weight loss, we could see how well it's working, because as I said today, most people are either overweight or fat in the United States. But the standard recommendation that's still given by my medical schools and the medical profession, most of them, is that if you want to lose weight, just exercise more and eat less. Well, it obviously doesn't work, because exercise, first of all, stimulates our appetite. How do you work up an appetite? You go out and dig a ditch or run a mile, and you'll stimulate your hunger. Secondly, exercise burns calories. So maybe I'll lose weight that way. Well, really doesn't pencil out, because if I eat that muffin from Starbucks, it's 500 calories. In order for me to exercise enough to burn off 500 calories, I'm going to be running all afternoon to do that. So it really doesn't make sense. But how about just eating less? Well, it's not useful for people because it doesn't really work. But there's a key to it, is that the three major food groups that your audience probably knows, fat and protein, which are necessary for life. And then the third one is the one that's not necessary for life. And there are several human civilizations that don't eat much, and that's carbohydrates, which are, sugar, starches, flour, rice, those kinds of things. And this unnecessary food group also has an interesting effect on the fat hormone, the storage hormone, which is insulin.
Right.
Protein and fat don't really stimulate insulin that much and don't cause fat storage. Interestingly, carbohydrates dramatically stimulate insulin and cause fat storage. What's the practical advice for that? Well, if I eat 100 calories of carbohydrates, let's say potato chips, that will tell my body to secrete insulin and store it as fat. And then I'll be hungry again and I'll eat the rest of the bag, right? Like everybody. On the other hand, if I eat 100 calories, that's right, exactly. If I eat 100 calories of hard-boiled eggs, which contain very few carbohydrates, they're primarily fat and protein, insulin won't be triggered. That energy will go to energy in my body. I won't store it as fat. I won't be hungry, and I won't feel a desire to eat the rest of the dozen eggs. So calories matter, not so much the number of calories, but the type of calories. So I counsel people, don't count calories, count carbohydrates, and just eat fewer carbs, and people will lose weight.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Not to count calories, count the carbohydrates, because if you're digesting the right type of calories, you might want more of that, right? Than if you want the carbohydrate type of calories. It was interesting. My wife met with a dietitian, and my wife loved barbecue potato chips. And when she learned, like with just one serving of barbecue potato chips, how long she would have to work out for 10 chips. It was like, for you to burn off the 10 chips, you got to work out for an hour and a half for 10 chips. I'm eating barbecue potato chips.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just a little bit of the right knowledge will kind of help change your motivation of what you really. And so, that's really interesting. Now, speaking of metabolic health, you emphasize metabolic health as a key driver of well-being. And how does metabolic dysfunction, though, sometimes, where people unknowingly suffer from, affect their mental clarity, focus, and decision-making at work? Because our health also impacts our productivity when it comes to our metabolic health. And you also have a chapter called The Metabolic Lie. In that chapter, you also talk about the queen metaphor. So I'll stop there. If you can kind of reply to that.
Sure. Yeah. Metabolic health. This was a wake-up call for me, because the chronic diseases that we talked about earlier seem to be very different. How is mental illness related to diabetes, or how is obesity related to cancer? And it turns out they're all related by this common root cause. In other words, the same metabolic dysfunction that increases our risk for cancer also increases our risk for diabetes and mental illness and heart disease and all these things. And it's fascinating. That means that the same lifestyle strategies we do that will make us lose weight will also improve our chances for mental illness and cancer and Alzheimer's disease. It's fascinating. One of the diets one of the effects of a low carbohydrate diet is something called ketosis, which means that our bodies we burn a healthy type of fat called ketones instead of glucose. And this is something historically that we've done for millennia. When people are fasting, they go into ketosis. But the interesting point is, going into ketosis now has beneficial effects in Alzheimer's patients. In other words, some patients, and by no means not all patients, but there's a proportion of Alzheimer's patients, when they go on a ketogenic diet and go into this healthy lifestyle nutrition, they actually reverse their Alzheimer's disease. In other words, their mental confusion gets better.
Right.
A lot of people, when they go into ketosis, I notice it, my brain fog goes away. I have much more clarity. And it goes on and on. The same things are being seen with cancer patients now. People are using ketogenic diets and this is investigation. It's not a substitute for mainline cancer treatment, but in some cancers, it appears it may add a benefit. And also for diabetes, it does that. And then Chris Palmer, a psychiatrist from Harvard, has begun putting his psychiatric patients on ketogenic diets. And again, not all of them, but some of the patients have dramatic reversals of their mental illness. In other words, even to the point where he's at McLean Hospital outside of Boston.
Right.
He deals with very sick patients institutionalized in the hospital on drugs. And for some of these patients, when they go on this healthy diet, they actually reverse their schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorders, manic depressive disorders to the point where they can go off medications and actually go home to their families. And again, it doesn't work for everybody, but the fact that it works for anybody is fascinating. And I was talking to Chris. He's been on my podcast a couple of times, and I said, Chris, how do you know it's the, that's great. You're doing that. It's wonderful work. And he has a great book out called Brain Energy that talks about this work. But I said, how do you know it's the ketogenic diet? How do you know it isn't something else? And he goes, well, one of them, Mr. Smith, had schizophrenia. He was in the hospital, hospitalized, couldn't work, away from his family. We put him on a ketogenic diet. He got off all meds. Now he's back with his family. He's back. He has a job. He's working. Yeah. And I said, but how do you know it's the diet? He said, well, Mr. Smith tells me that when he starts eating junk food, and junk food is largely carbohydrates and will take you out of ketosis, right, that he knows he's going out of ketosis because voices start talking to him again. And hearing voices is the hallmark of the schizophrenia, that type of mental illness that doesn't occur with anything else. And right, and he says and then he goes back into ketosis and the voices go away. So it's pretty remarkable that way.
Yeah, that really is. And it's almost like by adjusting your diet and focusing on the things that the way we should be eating or the way our bodies say we should be eating, that we give our bodies the room to heal themselves. And I think that's what's really fascinating about the body. I've done, I'm not in the medical field at all, but because of things I've gone through, and I'll talk about it on my first podcast, where I had a major bout with vertigo and I lost ability to walk 6 weeks before my TEDx talk, and how music healed me just, with the way music vibrates the brain and so on. But I also had to really started learning about stress management and diet. It led me down a road of studying about neuroscience and kinesiology and epigenetics and quantum physics, and just to understand all these different sciences and understanding what was happening to me and how I could use my lifestyle, reduction of stress, and so on to really restore and allow my body to begin to heal itself and to correct the vestibular imbalance that was happening. And so it's amazing how when we, one, listen to our bodies, but two, we give our bodies what it needs and nothing more. And a lot of the quote unquote junk food or carbohydrate heavy foods that are out there, we back off from. It gives our bodies chances to breathe, right? And to kind of make that correction. So I think that's really fascinating about the ketogenic diet that you're discussing there. And it kind of drives me to another part of the conversation around hypertension, because especially now, we live in such a polarized world. And we talked about just how even diets can be politically charged. It's the right diet or the left diet or whatever, who knows, but we can get politically charged. But hypertension is real because of the stress that everyone's on. I mean, whether they're going to lose their job, and people, right now, people who thought they had really secure jobs, right? Really, really secure jobs, no longer know if they're going to have their jobs. People who are not in the government and who are in IT thought they had really secure jobs. AI comes along, and now everybody's wondering, what's going to happen? Is my job going to be automated? Is an AI agent going to be built that's going to take away the way I'm able to do? And it's not like menial labor jobs. These are high sophisticated jobs where AI can get in and do a lot of the processing and thinking and analyze data in ways that humans just can't, millions of lines of code. So when it comes to this idea of the hypertension lie, what are your thoughts around that? Because you also talk about blood pressure in that same conversation in that chapter.
Yeah, that's such an important question, Gerald, because hypertension is one of those chronic diseases. And today in America, most adults either are being treated for hypertension or they have hypertension. So it's over 50% of people. So it's huge, and it's something silent. We should get our blood pressure checked and everything. But the advice, in full disclosure, that was one of the diseases I had too. And the advice that's given is just eat less salt. There's kind of, and control your stress and everything. And the problem with salt is there's evidence that salt may not be the primary driver for hypertension, because historically, before refrigeration, we ate huge amounts of salt because we used to preserve food and other things. And hypertension wasn't really a problem there. There are other factors we talk about in the book. A couple simple things are mouthwash that I didn't know about. Mouthwash is designed to kill bacteria in our mouth, right? The problem is the bacteria in our mouth, while there are some bad ones, there are also good ones too. And the good ones make something called nitric oxide, which dilates our blood vessels and lowers our blood pressure. And when we constantly take mouthwash and kill the bacteria in our mouth, then it repopulates with sort of random bacteria. And the problem is, by taking mouthwash, we decrease the type of bacteria that make nitric oxide. And an interesting study that we talk about in the book is people who use mouthwash regularly have higher blood pressure than people who don't. It's an association study, but there's other evidence as well. For that reason, I don't use mouthwash anymore. I still brush my teeth, but I don't use antibacterial mouthwash. It's like taking antibiotics for your gut microbiome. Right. You kill everything and then it repopulates, and it may not repopulate with the healthy stuff as well. But the other piece in the book is that there's another pathway for hypertension, and that is through a type of sugar called fructose. Yep. And fructose is half of the table sugar, which is glucose and fructose. So this fructose, which comes from fruit also, it's detoxified by the liver, but the pathway for the metabolism of the fructose involves uric acid, and then ultimately it decreases nitric oxide and blood vessels. So who would have thought that eating sugar actually contributes to hypertension? And Richard Johnson, who we talk about in the book, he's a scientist, a physician that's written extensively about that in his book, Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. It's about fructose and the effects of hypertension. And stress is certainly a factor with hypertension. It's no question about it. But the simple solution of just eat less salt is, in my opinion, not really the answer. And it goes a little bit deeper than that. It's all about metabolic health, and the same metabolically healthy lifestyle, which will be low carbohydrate, low fructose diet, and you throw in no mouthwash, of course, will actually, when people go on a low carb diet, a ketogenic diet, for a lot of them, they experience lightheadedness because their blood pressure medicines are now making their blood pressure too low, and they need to get off the medicines, because essentially treating their blood pressure without drugs,
without the medication. And who knew about mouthwash?
Yeah.
I mean, because you hear all the benefits of, obviously, having a fresh breath and so on, and it's getting rid of all this bad bacteria. But it's, I've never heard it talked about from the standpoint of nitric oxide, that it's getting rid of that bacteria, which is necessary for opening up our veins for oxygenation of our blood.
Yeah, the nitric oxide is the same thing that's in Cialis and Viagra, the erectile dysfunction drugs. They dilate the blood vessels, which is healthy throughout the body, in all the blood vessels. There are other reasons that mouthwash is bad, not just nitric oxide, but there's a bacteria called P. gingivalis that's in the mouth. But interestingly, that's now been found in the brain of Alzheimer's patients, and also in the wall of the blood vessels in heart attack patients. So, and it's believed to have some sort of contributes in some ways that we really don't understand yet to Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease. Right. This P. gingivalis is one more bacteria that when we use mouthwash all the time, it may repopulate back in there, which we don't want it to do.
Oh, wow. Okay. So basically we're saying that the mouthwash, although it kills it allows the mouth to regenerate more of that particular.
Yeah, the mouthwash doesn't necessarily favor P. gingivalis, but assuming we have a healthy flora that we've developed over a lifetime of growing up and when we wipe it out with an antibacterial mouthwash,
Right.
then whatever comes in is sort of random. And you don't want to roll the dice every day when we populate your mouth.
Russian roulette with it.
Yeah.
So drinking mouthwash is like Russian roulette. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I'm sorry if Listerine is your sponsor. I think you just lost them.
I don't think they are, but okay. Well, if they are, okay, well, Now, you also talk about the cardiovascular disease law. I thought that was really interesting because you also, you talk about the diet, you talk about the chronic disease and inflammation, poor dietary choices, the brain fog that we just talked about, and all of these things radically decrease our performance. But what is it about the cardiovascular disease lie that's so intriguing in the book?
Well, the number one prescribed drug for cardiovascular disease are statins. They're a type of drug that lowers cholesterol, LDL cholesterol in the blood. And the whole cardiology model for heart disease of the last 60 years that's also influenced our diet is that dietary fat drives dietary blood fat and cholesterol, which drives heart disease.
Right.
It's now been shown, and that's why people were told not to eat eggs and not to eat fat in their diet. Now it's been pretty much shown that eggs, you can eat eggs, are one of the healthiest things you can eat, and dietary cholesterol that you eat in your diet doesn't affect your blood cholesterol. But the question is, how much does blood cholesterol affect heart disease? In the book, we make the argument that while blood cholesterol is a risk factor for heart disease, it's a relatively small risk factor. And the bigger risk factor are things like smoking or things like metabolic disease. Again, metabolic disease that's affected by a high carbohydrate diet and all these things. So what does that mean? Well, you're going to increase your chances of a heart attack, in my opinion, more likely by having a donut covered with sugar than you are with having a steak full of saturated fat. And statins, although they're one of the most highly prescribed drugs, they have a small benefit for improving heart disease, but their benefits are exaggerated in the literature. And we talk about why that is with some statistical alchemy that fools even the doctors.
Right.
But the benefits are exaggerated, and the side effects or the damage that they cause are minimized. So I think we have to rethink statins, be very careful about them. Certainly not everybody should be on them, as some doctors recommend. And we talk about calcium scanning and calcium scores. If you have a 0 calcium score, you should definitely get off statins. But the chapter emphasizes metabolic health as opposed to this fat hypothesis for heart disease. Gotcha.
Now, this is the last thing we're going to talk about here, because again, I can't emphasize the importance of your book. One, I have learned a ton and just been, eyes opened, and when my wife comes home, I got to talk to her about mouthwash in our bathrooms. Like we have it in all of the guest bathrooms as well. Man, we're gonna just help you do mouthwash Russian roulette, okay? But you have a chapter on longevity, and the chapter is called "The Longevity Lie." And so with that in mind, I'm going to kind of read this question here that I put together, and it's like, if you could rewrite the curriculum of medical schools with productivity in mind and longevity in mind, what core health principles would you teach to help professionals, not health professionals, but to help professionals sustain high performance throughout their careers?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it has a fairly straightforward answer. I didn't intend to write a book about longevity or include it, but I realized the chronic diseases that we mentioned, that list we've gone through, statistically are the diseases that you and I and most of our listeners will die of. In other words, those are the diseases that determine our longevity statistically. heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's. It's a short list.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the cancer lie chapter, and I figure people can read that one. But yeah, go ahead.
So the whole point is the same healthy lifestyle that we do, these metabolically healthy things will decrease our risk of all these diseases. In other words, we'll push them back so they occur later in life. Why get your heart attack at 55? Why get it at 75? Why get it at 95? Let's get it at 125, push it back. I mean, let's face it, as Jim Morrison said, nobody gets out alive, right? We're all going to die of something, and we're probably going to die of one of those diseases, but let's just push them back. And that's the whole point with the longevity thing, that the best approach to longevity is this healthy lifestyle. And if I could, one thing about the healthy lifestyle, and this was a wake-up call for me, I didn't realize this at all. As a doctor, I always thought of these chronic diseases as you either have them or you don't have them. One day you walk in and you go, oh, guess what? You've got diabetes. You go, whoa, I didn't know that. Or, oh, you forgot your keys. You have Alzheimer's disease. Your doctor tells you that. And I'm not making light of this. These are all very serious things. But point is that now I understand that these diseases, literally all the chronic diseases we mentioned, they don't start the moment the doctor diagnoses them. In other words, I believe, and there's good evidence for it, that they start years to decades before the doctor tells me I have, Alzheimer's or anything else. Well, what does that mean? That means that these lifestyle changes, we should be doing them now, no matter whether we have these diseases or not, because if we wait until the doctor tells us we have this disease, we've missed a tremendous opportunity for prevention or improvement. I have people say, hey, I don't have any diseases. My doctor tells me all my labs are normal, so I'm going to do lifestyle once I get a disease. Well, that's not the right way to think about it. We should all start having a healthy lifestyle now, push these diseases back as late as we can. And that's hopefully an important message of the book.
Yes. And you cover a number of others. Obviously, you also covered the Alzheimer's lie. And I have, my mom passed of Alzheimer's, and I know people who are, struggling with that, or
mine too.
passed with that. And you have the cancer lie. And there's so much more for us to talk about, but that's why people should go get the book. I really believe that it's a game changer, because it's a paradigm shift, right? From someone who's a scholar, who's a medical professional, who's a professor at, some of the best schools in the country in this space, and has been, written, over 200 articles that are peer reviewed. And most people write articles, they're not peer reviewed, so no one's going to question what they're writing. So you have to be on spot. But to then say, hey, I'm still searching to uncover the truth of what I've been teaching and writing about for years and years and years, is very commendable. And it puts you on a path to be unique from the standpoint of you're always going to be uncovering these truths even more, because medicine's, we're learning more every day when it comes to the genes and DNA and who we are and how we're made up. And so I really want to commend you for the work that you've done and for coming on the podcast and sharing it. I know it will be a blessing to a lot of people to listen to this podcast and then to go out and get your book. So for people who want to know more about you and where they can learn more about you and get your book, where can they go?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that, Gerald. You're very kind. And you can go to my website. It's robertlufkinmd.com. And you can actually download a free chapter of the book, both in audio and PDF form. So please do that if you want to check it out. Also, I'm very active on social media. My wife says too active. Reach out and say hi to me there if you want also.
Excellent. Well, Doc, I really appreciate our time together. And thank you so much for coming on to Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you, Gerald. It's been a wonderful conversation.
If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community. Thank you again for your support and for listening to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.